Today I'm making another meal in a jar. It's so exciting. This one is chicken and gravy. But don't get fooled by the gravy part because you can't really can gravy. You can't make a thick sauce with cornstarch or flour and can it. But the gravy part will happen after you open your jar. But it is chicken. It's really simple. There's about 8 or 9 ingredients and you just put everything in a jar. No cooking in advance. Everything goes in raw and it'll cook in the pressure canner. This is so good you can basically just open the jar and eat right, well, heat it up, but eat right from the jar. Or I can see this being poured inside of a pie shell and making like a pot pie. Like, it's onions, it's celery, it's potatoes, it's chicken. Like, what more could you ask for a delicious pot pie? So let's get going, let's dive in. So to your bowl, you're going to add 4 pounds of chicken. I use chicken breast, but you can use chicken thighs as well. 2 cups of onions, finely diced. 2 cups of celery, 2 cups of potatoes, diced potatoes, 4 teaspoons of black pepper, and 4 teaspoons of poultry seasoning. We're going to give this a stir. Once we have all our ingredients well mixed, all that's left to do is to fill our jars. We are going to be using some chicken broth to backfill our jars with, and you don't really need a lot, so we really want to pack this down tight in our jars, and then we'll backfill with some chicken broth. But before you backfill with your chicken broth, you need to add 1 tablespoon of white wine, like a dry white wine, in each jar. Now, I'm not a big fan of white wine, so I didn't want to waste any, so I just bought this teeny tiny little bottle, and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon per jar, and then backfill with the chicken broth. So we may only need a few tablespoons of chicken broth per jar. So let's get going. It's about here when I was editing this video that I realized that I didn't film the part where I was putting the chicken and gravy in the jars. So what I did is I borrowed these clips from my chicken curry, which is exactly the same process. So what you want to do is you want to pack your chicken in your jars quite fairly tight, and you want to leave 1-inch headspace. So you add your chicken in until you have 1-inch headspace from the top of your jar. Once that's done, you're going to add 1 tablespoon of your white wine in each jar, and then backfill with your chicken broth. You're then going to take your debubbler just to move the liquid down to the bottom of the jar to remove any air pockets that could be there, and then readjust your liquid again, making sure to always keep that 1-inch headspace. When canning anything with meat, you want to make sure to clean the rims of your jar with vinegar, and then you're going to put your cap on top and then your ring on fingertip tight as usual. Move this over to the canner once you are done. I've ended up with 7 jars. That's great. I always think I'm going to end up with 8, but it ends up being 7. So there you go, 7 jars. That's perfect. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that to make this recipe, you can't can or pressure can less than 4 jars. So I doubled the recipe and it got me 7 jars. So just a word of caution, if you find that it's a little bit too much, you can't have the recipe unless it gives you 4 jars. So it's 4 pint-sized jars, so 4 500 milliliter jars, or you can also do 2 quart-sized jars, which is the bigger 1-liter jar. Just to give you an idea for the quantity of chicken broth that I used, so I used about half. I did have 1 jar that wasn't packed down really tight, so I was able to fit a little bit more broth in that one. So half of this jar means somewhere around 500 milliliters, because this is a 1-liter jar, so 2 cups about. So that's how much broth that I used. And for the wine, I used about not even half of this tiny little bottle, so it doesn't take a lot. It's just 1 tablespoon per jar. Now, we are going to increase the heat. We are going to put our pot up on high. We are going to put the cover on top and seal it. Be sure to follow the instructions for your pressure canner. Every pressure canner is different. I think I'd never done this before. There we go. So now we wait till our pot is boiling nice and hard and we've got some steam coming out of the vent. Now that this button has come up and there's a lot of steam coming out of the pot, we can vent our pot. So what we do is we just time this for 10 minutes. The pot has vented for 10 minutes. It's now time to add the weighted gauge. I'm going to put it on right away, and I'll talk after because then it's going to get a lot quieter. So my gauge is 10 pounds of pressure. That's how much I have to can at the altitude where I live, because I'm at sea level. But I do have a dial gauge as well. So basically I am going to be canning at 11 pounds of pressure. Be sure to can at the pressure that is appropriate for the altitude where you live. So you can kind of search online if you're not quite sure what you're supposed to be canning at or what pressure you're supposed to be canning at. Now, the dial is going to slowly go up until it reaches around 10 pounds of pressure, but before I get to 10, I kind of gradually lower the pressure down a little bit. Otherwise, it kind of gets to boiling really hard. I don't want it to boil out of control. You only start to time, however, when you get to the appropriate pressure. So I am going to start to timing my jars when I get to 11 pounds of pressure. So for the 500 milliliter jars, I need to process these for 75 minutes. But if you're using the quart-sized jars, the larger jars, you need to be canning those for 90 minutes. Always keep an eye on your canner. You have to continuously lower the heat once you get to your pressure. Otherwise, it'll boil out of control. But you don't want to lower the heat too fast, because if it goes below your pressure, you need to start the processing time all over again. So always keep a close eye on your pot. I'm going to start gradually reducing the heat, even if I'm not quite at 11 pounds of pressure yet. I am now at 11 pounds of pressure, so I'm going to start timing this and continue reducing the heat. Time is up. We are going to turn the heat off on our stove. Now, very carefully, if you can, we're going to transfer the pot over to the other burner. If the pot is too heavy for you, leave it where it is. It'll still cool down, and it'll just maybe take a little bit longer. So we're going to transfer this over. Now, we still have to be really patient. We need to let this cool down naturally. So the dial is going to drop to 0, and then this button is going to drop. So we can't do anything before those two things happen. It may take another 20 minutes for that to happen, so we just need to be patient. The button has dropped. The dial has gone down to 0. So now I can remove the weighted gauge, but we still have to wait another 10 minutes, letting the pressure come out of the pot before we can safely remove the cover. We just need to be patient a little bit more. So now I'm going to remove my cover. Flip the cover away from your face just to make sure that the steam escaping doesn't burn you, because there's still a lot of steam in there. Now, before you remove your jars from your pot, we got to let it sit for another 10 minutes. And I can hear them sealing, so that's good. Let's remove these jars from the pot. I have ended up with 7 jars of another meal in a jar that will give me 7 very quick meals when the time is running low. Be sure to leave your jars untouched for 24 hours. Just let them sit. Don't fill around, change them places, or store them. After the 24 hours are up, remove the ring. Never store your jars with the rings on top. It could create a false seal. So the jars could actually unseal and reseal if this ring is left on, and that would make for a very unsafe product. So be sure to remove these after 24 hours. Write on top of your jar what it is that you put in there and the year that you canned it as well, because time flies and sometimes we forget how long we've had something canned. This can stay safe in your cabinets, stored in a nice, cool, dark, dry environment for a year, probably more, but we say safely for up to a year. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy my content. If you do, give it a big thumbs up. Don't be shy, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to check back again soon to see what other content I will have coming out.